Hello everyone and welcome to Self as Learner, Organizational Leadership 3000, Learning Modules 4 and 5. At this point you are basically through the bulk of the course. We're just having a couple of other theorists who are going to study during this particular learning module. This is the feedback loop between reflection and action that was described by Korthagen and Vassallos. In their theory you're going to notice that there's a number of different phases that one can go through. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about the idea of having a moment of action and then reflecting on it later. So as you're looking at the Korthagen and Vassallos loop, consider that Organizational Leadership 3000 is focused on phases 1, 2, and 3 of this loop. You have an action in the past, you're going to look back on it and describe it and do some reflection about what the essential aspects of that particular event were. As you progress to Organizational Leadership 3050 and Organizational Leadership 4000, then you're going to be working on the phases 4 and 5, creating alternative methods of action and then trying out new ways of adapting to new situations and new schools of thought. In this particular learning module, you're going to be looking at Korthagen and Vassallos, discussing their diagrams, and working on your discussion tool film example using their models, using their diagrams. Remember that when you're doing your write-up of the film, you should keep in mind those learning outcomes of the course, describing events and experiences, analyzing those events and analyzing the feelings that are involved in people learning through those events and dealing with those events, summarizing the actions and feelings, recording those events in written work, and discussing those situations using the conceptual frameworks, using the individuals that we've been studying, like Korthagen and Vassallos, like Keegan and Leahy. Those are the kinds of people who you want to be referring to as you answer your discussion questions. This is another model from Korthagen and Vassallos called the onion model. One of the things that you're going to notice is that this is a complex diagram with many different parts. It sort of relates to the old expression about, an onion being a complex thing that has many layers to it. What you're looking at here are layers that make you a learner. First of all, you can start out in the middle with the idea of your mission. Why are you here? In this case, you could be thinking about it in terms of your process, being a student and completing your organizational leadership bachelor's degree. And then you can think about your own identity. Who are you? How do you describe yourself? How do you see yourself? Around that, you have your beliefs, the kinds of things that you believe in, the value system that you hold dear. And then around that, you'll see your competencies. What do you do well? What are you good at? What kinds of skills and talents do you have? And then around that, you'll see your behavior. What do you do? What kinds of habits do you have? Do you feel that you have positive work habits, or do you feel like you have room for improvement with how you work, with how you approach a task? And then around that, you have the layer of the environment. What kinds of things do you end up having to cope with? Are there social influences that you are dealing with? Do you have family that you have to take care of? What kind of context do you have to work within? Next up, remember the idea of self-transformation through core qualities. This is another more complex way of describing the feedback loop from Korthagen and Vassallos. As you're looking at this feedback loop, notice that you want to use different phases of thinking about your experiences and then becoming aware of what you're hoping for, becoming aware of the core qualities that are needed to respond effectively to a new situation. Think about that as a part of your own story as a student in organizational leadership. What kinds of core qualities are you finding out about through this process of reflective learning? What kinds of core qualities do you want to develop within yourself as you go through the process of these classes? So keep in mind that with Organizational Leadership 3000, we're in those first phases of learning how to analyze and become aware of what was going on in a past event. That's the first step in trying to transform yourself and improve yourself and have that degree behind you so that you'll be able to progress in your career. Now, the discussion for this learning module are the film examples. Remember that in Learning Module 1 we mentioned that there were 4 film choices and you need to pick one. Those 4 film choices are described in a little bit more detail here. In the film Local Hero, we have somebody who is an acquisitions expert for an oil and gas company out of Houston, and we see him put into a new situation involving trying to buy land for a refinery in Scotland. And there's a number of different funny things that happen during the film, but it's an interesting example of a character who is engaged in self-reflection. In the film Nobody's Fool, we have a man, Paul Newman, who is, very important to his community, but also seen as a bit of a rascal. So the way that he ends up dealing with his life situation, the way that he ends up learning about new things, learning about the concept of being a grandfather, is pretty interesting to look at in that film. And then 3 and 4 are films that involve female characters. How to Make an American Quilt, dealing with a young girl who is deciding about getting married and how she ends up interacting with other people and other women who have been through the marriage experience before. And then in the film Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood, we see a woman who is an adult trying to deal with her own perception about memories of her mom and her mother's friends. So there's some really interesting ways in which you can look at these movies as stories of self-analysis, stories of self-reflection. And those are the kinds of things that we'd like you to write about in the discussion tool for this particular learning module. In discussion tool, look at these questions on this particular slide, and then try to answer them in light of the film that you chose to watch. How are the characters in the film making certain assumptions? Why do they have those beliefs? And then what do they learn in the course of the film, maybe in spite of those beliefs or that challenges those beliefs? What kinds of goals are they working toward? What kinds of things are they hoping for? Do they end up achieving them? How do they achieve them? And then think about what character in the film you might identify with the most. So it's a good chance for you to think about how the literature that we've looked at during the course relates to real-world experiences and to film experiences that are kind of entertaining too. Here's just a recap of the literature that we've gone over during Organizational Leadership 3000. The background literature on reflection that we've gone over with started a little bit with Sullivan and Rosen, the idea of one's identity, how your identity is formed, and how the institutional and social engagement that you have will continue to shape your identity. Kolb is the person who had the story in our class about going to the Automobile Museum and having his assumptions about automobiles challenged. He's somebody who's an expert on reflective learning, thinking about the idea of trying to create positive feedback loops where you acquire new knowledge, the acquisition phase, and then you end up learning new things through convergence as well. In Fiddler and Marino, we saw the idea of analyzing a past experience by noting what was getting your attention and what kinds of beliefs and theories may have influenced how you looked at that learning experience. Next, we had Keegan and Leahy discussing the idea of having a socialized mind and beginning as a team player, but then over time developing more skills for analyzing why you think what you think and for having the chance to do problem solving that may be outside of that team player model. In Korthagen and Vasalos, we saw the onion model and we saw the feedback loop model, which describes looking back at a past experience and then trying to analyze the core qualities that you should be cultivating to be able to deal with those new experiences successfully. In the final discussion topic of the course, the last week, you're going to be writing a discussion post that describes your degree program and how your learning experiences relate to the learning outcomes of that degree program. Be sure to reflect on your past experiences and discuss whether or not you have past experience artifacts that you are going to use as a part of your degree program. If you're going through the prior learning assessment process, do you have on-the-job training evidence or on-the-job evaluations that you're going to be including? Think about the artifacts that you still have that show prior learning experiences that you have been through in the course of your life. Thanks again for taking the class. It's been wonderful working with you. Take care.